Hi, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about understanding kids during a pandemic. We're going to go through some thoughts and feelings they're having, ways they might be affected, and then things that you can do to help them through this time. My name is Stacy Miller. I am a school counselor at Buford Elementary, and I'm happy to have you joining me today. So when you think about a pandemic, you're going to have a wide range of feelings. Some people are at ease, they don't see anything wrong with what's going on, and other people are extremely panicked. It's not that one thing is right or wrong. As we tell kids, there's no such thing as feelings being correct or incorrect. It's just kind of where you are. So it's important during this time to figure out where you are and just give that some space. And then it's important to also work through that, and we'll talk about the importance to that in just a minute. But again, just like adults are feeling a wide range of feelings, kids are as well. So keep that in mind as you have a classroom full of kids joining you on that first day of school. One of the things that's important to keep in mind is kids learn mostly from humans modeling. So the things that we model is going to help you help the kids understand what they should be doing. So it's really important that we model the behavior that we want. If we want kids to be wearing masks as much as we can wear masks, we need to do that. If you are on that anxiety scale pretty high, like a 10, try to work through that, because the more anxious we are, our kids are going to pick up on that. They're watching and listening all the time. When you take care, they're going to take care too. So remember to keep in mind taking care of yourself, so then they, in fact, take care as well. I had to include this picture. When can I stop worrying about COVID-19 and start worrying about flying again? Flying is a fear for a lot of people, and obviously COVID-19 has kind of trumped that, depending on where you're at in that scale. A lot of our families have a lot of different stress around the pandemic. Some might just be for health reasons. Some of our family members in the community may have some pre-existing conditions that they're worried about getting COVID. Some may be currently hospitalized, but there's a lot of fear and anxiety with what could happen, what is happening. But in addition to that too, as the pandemic has hit, there's some economic issues as well that have come into play. So there's a lot of anxiety around, do I have enough food? What's going on with my friends or my family? Which is all compounding the mental health of everyone around us. So because of this, kids and adults have lots of different feelings and behaviors, communication. So I want us to keep that in mind, that as we have kids come in, we have to reteach and teach, but this year is going to be especially different because they are walking into the schools with a lot of extra thoughts and feelings about what has gone on. And kids don't always communicate what's going on, and so it kind of comes out as behavior. So I want us to keep that in mind. So you might see things like a kid having a meltdown over something that seems very trivial, or not talking. It might seem very argumentative or very distracted. So just know that that's partly going to happen, and we'll talk a little bit about what we can do to help with that. So it's not always that the kid is necessarily trying to be defiant or argumentative. It's just, this is kind of where they are in all this, in the spectrum, and just know that this is typical. One of the things that there's talk about is just grief. So I want to give you the definition of grief, because some people might say, well, what if nobody's died? The definition of grief is just a natural response to a loss. So yes, we experience grief when someone close to us dies. And if a student, or maybe even you or someone, has experienced a loss, as in a loss of life, you are definitely going to, as they are, experience the kind of grief that we normally talk about. But I want you to think about just loss in general. So if you think about the last couple months, the types of loss that we have experienced as a collective society. So things like loss of the traditions that we normally do. 4th of July probably looked very different for a lot of us than it normally does. Maybe there was, a picnic they usually go to every year, and now that no longer happens because it got canceled, or the loss of some kind of closure at the end of the year. And even if, you have a younger grade that didn't necessarily have school, they still had the loss of maybe preschool, or the loss of something else, or the loss of not having any kind of closure to the end of the year that so many of our students usually see. Or the loss of, just friends, that feelings of isolation. And again, you're going to have a wide spectrum of situations and feelings around this, and then those families who have experienced maybe a job loss, that's going to funnel down to kids as well. So when you think about grief, just think about that natural response to that loss. So we're going to kind of look at like COVID and just talk about like some examples of how that grief comes into play. So one example is, a student might say, I can't believe this happening to me. This doesn't affect me. I'm not old. So you're in that denial phase. It's fine. This is fake. It's not real, or I'm fine. Another one is the anger. Everyone's reacting. It's not fair. I should be able to see my friends. I don't understand. You might see some of that bargaining, like, okay, so if I stay away from people for a little while, then it will be okay. Or despair, like, oh, when's this going to end? I just don't know it's just never going to go back to normal. And then just that acceptance, where I understand the pandemic's happening. I'm going to do what I can do to kind of help myself through this time, or, maybe this isn't forever, and I'll wash my hands, or I'll be protective. So, and the thing about the stages of grief is it's not exactly in order. So when they say stages, it's not like stage 1 is denial, 2. You're going to, as you and kids are going to go in and out of these stages all the time. So one moment you might be like, okay, I've come to a good place. Like, I realize this is what's happening. It's almost done. And then tomorrow, all of a sudden, you're angry again because this isn't fair. And like, I don't understand why we don't have a cure yet. And so just understand that those are all normal feelings. And your kids walking into the classroom are going to be in the same place as well. One of the things that, they're talking as a whole is just that trauma. And I know trauma seems like a big word to use, because when we think about trauma, we think about those big things like, a car accident or abuse at home, or those kind of things. But I'm going to read the definition of trauma, and then I want you to just think about, with what's going on, like how it does make sense. So traumatic event is a life experience that involves an actual or perceived threats to safety and well-being of an individual or someone close to that individual. A traumatic event can overwhelm a person's coping strategies, causing extreme emotional, psychological, and physical distress. So our kids are feeling what we call like shared trauma, and I'm going to give you some examples of trauma, and it's a continuum, and we all experience trauma differently, but things like 9/11, that was traumatic for our country to go through that, and life has changed since then. And if you ask most people, where were you on 9/11, they can tell you that. Any kind of disasters, just any kind of that shared, and pandemics fall under trauma. So there's that shared trauma. And again, it's a continuum. Some people are fine and doing okay mentally from the trauma, and then others are not so much. And no, that's exactly where our kids and our families are going to be. And just because they seem okay one day doesn't mean everything's fine. And you as well might be in the same position where today you're fine and it's not that big of a deal. Next week, you're very worried and anxious, or you just might be fine. And that's the thing. There's no right or wrong answer to this experience. So here's some examples. I'm going to try to move this. So I just talked a little bit about the events such as COVID can lead to that collective trauma. And that collective trauma is just something that's shared by an entire group. The whole entire world's experiencing this. So we as a whole are all going to have some trauma that's associated with this. There's heightened vigilance, more fear, and challenges, which I think we would all agree that that is true. So I outlined a few things that that is seen in kids who are experiencing trauma. So I'll just give you a minute to kind of look over that. So your kids in the classroom, when they come in that first day, may bring some of these things with them. So just keep an eye on it. And obviously the students who continue to stay in this place or continue to struggle with this are ones that are going to need some additional support for that social emotional well-being. So I kind of wrote this quote because I think this summarizes perfectly kind of where we're at. So we really like routine. We really like things that are the same. So while at one moment our brains like things that are different, we also like routine. So it's kind of this balance back and forth with wanting different things, but also really liking that routine. And a lot of you are probably used to the first day going a certain way, or setting up your classroom a certain way, or the way the kids come in a certain way. And just know we're gonna have to be flexible. No, it may be a little uncomfortable, but if you can establish some routine within the way things are going right now, it's not only going to help you, but it's going to also help the kids. It's going to help us kind of fall into that comfort zone that humans crave so much. So a lot of you probably feel like, okay, so you're telling me all these things that are going on with our kids. So then what? So I made a little acronym here. It's kind of like a wolf howling. It's the closest thing I could get. So what are some things that you could do? First of all, acknowledge. Our kids didn't get lack of closure. And this grieving process is going to take time. Kids are going to be okay one day, not okay the other, and that's okay. We're all in a different place in this. Acknowledge the loss that is experienced. Loss of birthday parties, loss of maybe seeing grandma and grandpa, loss of the traditions and the things that normally happen. Like, acknowledge that plays a role in our human collective experience, and that's been hard. It's been hard on all of us. Anticipate our kids are going to be tired. A lot of them have lack of schedules. They're all over the place. Their parents are feeling this collective stress, and that will funnel down. You might see some behavior more so than other years. And things are not going to go as planned. You might have a plan in place, but things are not going to go the way maybe you normally want them to. So just anticipate that. It's going to be okay. Super important to set up routine. Kids thrive on knowing what's expected. So setting up those expectations, taking extra time to really help your kids understanding maybe how your mask procedures in your classroom go, or how we wash our hands. Really setting up time for that fresh air and that movement. Our kids need that. It's super important. And then relationship. That is a big protective factor of trauma. It is a big protective factor of kids having a difficult time, is having that person that they know that cares about them and trusts them and that they can lean on. So really putting in those positive disciplines so they can build that relationship with you, that they know that expectations, and taking time to build those relationships. And even though it's difficult with the social distancing, maybe you do some touchless greetings in your classroom, or morning meetings are a really good way to build those relationships. So, thinking outside the box of how can I make sure we really get those relationships down during such a difficult time. Keep in mind, you all do this all the time. I mean, you are amazing. There's so many times where we walk into the classroom with a plan, and, whether or not the kids didn't understand it or something happened, you figure it out. And that's kind of where we're at. We're all in this together. You are the everything to the kids. So just remember, we are going to model what we want the kids. So even though, be a duck. We're calm on top of the water, but we're paddling underneath. The kids aren't seeing the paddling. So if we're feeling really anxious and crazy, that we just present to calm. Give yourself space and time to work through those feelings. If you are super anxious, making sure you're dealing with your mental health and helping yourself through that. Because again, we're modeling this stuff for our kids. It's very, very important. And lastly, I just included some references and places I got some of this information. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, but we're going to have a great, awesome year. Thank you.